In 1985, the National Council of Teachers of English posted a resolution basically saying to stop teaching grammar, de emphasize grammar. What they said was there's no research that proves that learning sentence structure and grammar was all that important. They said it was detrimental to creative writing.
Welcome to Innovating Education. I'm Dr. Riley Williams, and in each episode, we explore bold ideas and breakthrough strategies shaping the future of teaching and learning. Today's guest is Bob Safran, an educator, author, and grammar instruction pioneer with over 50 years of experience in the classroom. He's the founder of EGUMPP and a vocal advocate for bringing grammar back into the heart of literacy instruction. In a time when the science of reading is shaping how we think about decoding and language development, Bob challenges us not to forget one key component, grammar, and its foundational role in comprehension. So let's dive in and explore what it really means to teach grammar as a science-based literacy practice. Bob, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
So let's get started. Can you share a bit about your journey as an educator? What's kept you committed to grammar instruction over the past 5 decades?
Sure. My educational journey began with me being a public school teacher for several years. Once I left the classroom, I took a position with Science Research Associates, which was a college textbook company owned by IBM, and I started out selling college textbooks. After a few years, I was promoted to an acquisition editing position, and I traveled the country working with authors all over the country to write computer science books for SRA. This lasted for several years. Then I accepted a position as the director of a career school in Pennsylvania. I did this for several years, and finally I decided maybe it was time for me to go on my own. So, what I did is I founded a secretarial school, and that secretarial school eventually became a nationally accredited 2 year college, and I had two campuses. For 35 years, I was the president and CEO of my career school. Now, I started in the 90s, Safran Publishing Company, and I wrote and published a learning system that included a English handbook and exercises similar to diagramming sentences using a coding system. And this was a product that once it was developed, I kept testing, class testing, and selling it to other career schools. Well, technology made a difference. So I had to create an HTML version. And that's the version of eGUMPP we have today. Okay, this version will work on any computer device and work on basically any platform. And it is being used by universities, high schools, and many, many, many homeschool families. And then finally, what I did was over the years, I held 4 academic competitions, which I called Grammar Bowls. And the first Grammar Bowl was at Hampton University in Virginia with college students. And I worked with the famous, at that time, famous 35-year on public TV commentator, Tony Brown. And together we did a great Grammar Bowl that received all kind of praise in the community. Well, I followed that up and I had 2 Arizona Grammar Bowls, 8th and ninth grade students, sponsored by Grand Canyon University, highly successful. And then finally in Pennsylvania, I had a Grammar Bowl with 8th and ninth graders, which in York County, the county was called the White Rose City, and in Lancaster, it was called the Red Rose City. So I had the Grammar Bowl, the White Rose versus the Red Rose, highly successful. So that's pretty much my educational journey and my experience with education. Now, your second question was commitment to grammar. Wow. First of all, I didn't go to an elementary school in my day. I went to a grammar school. In those days, everybody referred to elementary school as grammar school. And when my grammar school, they drilled us with diagramming sentences. Very, very important. And I loved it. And to this day, I think it was one of the most important skills that I acquired. Let me tell you how it first helped me. When I started college, and I was starting at the end of each semester, when I had to take my final exam, I was praying that would be a blue book test, not a multiple choice true and false test where what's the difference between an orange, true or false. I wanted a writing test because when I could write in a blue book, I could get a higher grade. So that was the first thing that committed me to grammar. And the second thing was when I was the acquisition editor in the office, firsthand, I found something interesting. All of the secretaries that had excellent proofreading, editing skills were continually promoted first. Who wants to have documents go out that aren't well written? So it was bad news for me because I had two great secretaries and I kept losing them. And I didn't want to lose them, but I felt good for them because they were moving up the ladder. So that was the second thing that impressed me. Well, then when I started my secretarial school, I said, how do I make my students competitive? Give them an advantage. And it was grammar. So I made grammar instruction one of the most important parts of their program. Boy, did it pay off. I had no problem. All of my students who graduated with good grammar skills were sucked up immediately. People wanted to hire them for positions. So that was it. And then the grammar bulls themselves. The results were phenomenal. I received testimonials from instructors. I received testimonials from students, from parents. And some of the testimonials were saying, my grammar was so good, I scored perfect or near perfect on the SAT and the ACT test. So, is grammar important to me? I don't see how it's not important. And so, yeah, I am greatly committed to learning grammar, and nobody should leave school without it.
You've said that reading, writing, and arithmetic are the non negotiables of real learning. Can you unpack how grammar is interwoven with reading and writing development and why its absence might be weakening the impact of our literacy instruction?
Absolutely. But you know what I really have to do? I have to explain to you what happened to grammar. Why? Why don't our students today know grammar? Well, here's what happened. In 1985, the National Council of Teachers of English posted a resolution basically saying to stop teaching grammar, de emphasize grammar. What they said was there's no research that proves that learning sentence structure and grammar was all that important. They said it was detrimental to creative writing. Okay? And I'm sitting here saying to myself, after all that stuff I just told you, how can that be possible? Well, let me tell you something. Here's what happened. After 2000, I think it was around 2000, the SAT and ACT started adding more grammar questions to their test. Now, let me tell you about in 2003, the National Commission on Writing, in a report called The Neglected R, called the writing of college graduates deplorable. And then what followed was there was a survey by the Society for Human Resource Management that found that nearly half of all graduates lack basic grammar and spelling. And then the National Assessment of Educational Progress, the NAEP, stated that three-quarters of both 12th and 8th graders lack proficiency in writing. And they also said that 40% of those who took the ACT writing exam in 2016 lack the reading and writing skills necessary to successfully complete a college level English composition class. So, what's that tell you about learning grammar and not knowing grammar?
I mean, it just kind of blows my mind. And now I'm kind of questioning, do I really understand grammar? I would like to specifically dive into grammar and the science of reading. So, the science of reading emphasizes both decoding and language comprehension. In your view, does grammar instruction support or even accelerate students' ability to comprehend complex texts?
Great question. Let's talk about comprehension. All right, now let's talk about that for a second, and let me tell you something. No matter what you read, if you read a novel, if you read instructions on how to fix something, if even you go to one of the newspapers and read an article in the newspaper, there's two possibilities. They're easy to read or they're difficult to read. Okay? So what I did was, to give you an example, I Googled and I wanted to know, give me examples of novelists who are easy to read. Immediately, I found that the authors easiest to read were John Grisham and Ernest Hemingway. And I found out the two of the authors that were difficult to read were William Faulkner and James Joyce. Now, what was the difference? Well, both with Grisham and Hemingway, they wrote clear, concise sentences. The average word length was 8 to 12 words. And obviously, they're very popular because they're, especially John Grisham today, their books really sell. Then let's look at Faulkner and let's look at Joyce. Okay, they write sentences that average 30 to 50 words, and many of them over 100 words. Now, to give you an example, I'm going to read for you an exact sentence that came out of one of Faulkner's books. Quote, just exactly like father when he was a boy and they hunted coons to the river bottom at right, and once they had to swim the river on a log. And it was raining and cold, and he had only one shoe and lost that one too. And his feet were cut and bleeding when he got home, and grandmother cried and made him go to bed. But grandfather said he was a man now. That's a 74-word sentence, okay? And it has 11 independent or 11 clauses in it. So now how do you comprehend that? Well, if you know sentence structure, and if you know that every sentence has to have a subject and a verb, and they always begin a complete thought. So I asked to break this sentence down into the 11 clauses. Here's what I got. Father was a boy. They hunted coons. They had to swim. It was raining. He had one shoe. He lost that shoe. His feet were cut. Grandmother cried. Grandmother made him go. Grandfather said he was a man. He was a man. So at least your comprehension by knowing sentence structure is much better because you can do that. That would be the same thing if you had any technical instructions. Some are written so poorly, you're sitting there saying, huh? What does this mean? And others are simple to read. So comprehension with sentence structure does work.
You have to be able to make your writing clear
Exactly.
because you're not writing for you, you're writing for the reader.
Yes. I can share another example with you. Are you familiar with the Deal Child readability test?
No.
Okay. Well, it's a test where they rate the reading level of different articles, paragraphs, and things like that. And if I'm saying this correctly, they're looking at vocabulary words, they're looking at length of sentences, and they come up with that. And at one point, years ago, if I'm correct, the Wall Street Journal was written on the fifth or sixth grade level. Try that today. And it's something that your viewers should do, which I've done. Go to the major newspapers. Go to the New York Times. Go to the Washington Post. Take the front page. Take some of the articles and just count the words in some of the sentences. And the sentences, articles that you can read are clear, crisp sentences. And the articles that you have a hard time with, and I've done this, and I've seen articles that had sentences that were 70, 80 words. Now, how easy is it to read sentences that are just like I just did here with the Faulkner thing? It's not easy. So, yeah, understanding how every word, phrase, and clause is functioning in the sentence enables you to do those things.
We know there's often a debate about the role of explicit instruction in language development. What does the research say about explicit grammar instruction versus more embedded or intuitive approaches?
Let me explain that in a simple example. NCTE says grammar is important, but the universities, 27 universities, say the opposite in a report that it was written, I guess, in 2003. It's called Understanding University Success. It was sponsored by the Pew Charitable Foundation. So what they did, and every high school district in the United States received this report. And what the report did, it took each subject and said, what should a student starting college be able to do to be successful in college? Well, these 27 universities included Harvard, MIT, Penn State, Michigan. So there was, very prestigious schools. And let me read their faculty viewpoint. Quote, students should know basic grammatical terminology in the parts of speech. They should distinguish between clauses, phrases, and complete sentences. The mechanics of writing is simply a subset of writing skills. Once students understand sentence structure, they know why one sentence is clear and another sentence is confusing. They can fix run ons, cut wordiness, and write with precision. That doesn't happen just by osmosis. It only happens when students understand sentence structure.
That kind of leads me to my next question. Can you talk about how understanding syntax contributes to reading fluency and comprehension? What are the developmental connections that we should be paying most attention to?
That's an easy question to answer. Okay. When somebody that knows sentence structure looks at a sentence, there's a lot of things they can do. Okay, one, what they can do is they can discover misplaced modifiers. For example, while driving down the beach, the sunset was beautiful. Are you telling me the sunset was driving down the beach? Okay, so all of a sudden, that's called a dangling modifier. Okay, or when you take a sentence and you know the difference between a dependent clause and a positive phrase. So in this sentence, Mrs. Jones, who has been our principal for more than 20 years, will be retired. Now, that adjective clause, who has been our principal for more than 20 years, 20 words, or 10 words, I'm sorry, and change it to an appositive. Mrs. Jones, our principal for 20 years. So we go from 10 words to 4 words, and we're saying exactly the same thing. Well, because you understand sentence structure and you're able to look at a wordy sentence and you're able to reduce it, it's going to improve comprehension. It's going to make things easier. It's doing what John Grisham and Ernest Hemingway do versus Faulkner and Joyce. So, yeah, it's very, very important.
Even further than that is the evolution of our texting. I won't even use a period in between certain sentences because culturally, and this is kind of for millennials, but culturally, if you put a period in a text, it's usually seen as aggressive. And so it's just all these run on sentences, or maybe like a sentence and a smiley face, or a sentence and a heart, because that's how our language has changed so much, especially in the last 10 years. So, Bob, for our listeners, we talked a little bit about it in our first question, but can you really go in and explain EGUMPP? What is it? What are the principles behind it? And most importantly, how does it support our students?
Absolutely. It's funny. I have been at many journalism conferences, and we have a booth, and people come up and they say EGUM, and they start looking, and they start EGUM. EGUM. What does that mean? Does it have anything to do with Forrest Gump? Okay, and I love it when they say that because the first thing I said is, "Oh, you've seen Forrest Gump." Yes. It was a great movie, wasn't it? Yes. Then I'd say, do you remember the scene where Forrest Gump was sitting on the bench with the lady and he had a box of chocolate? And everybody shakes like you, they shake their head, yes, I remember that. Then I say, don't forget that because that has nothing to do with EGUMP. So now let me tell you what EGUMP is. EGUMP is this. This, when I went to college, when we were supposed to know our grammar, and you went to buy your textbooks, they said get a English handbook as a reference. Not because you didn't understand grammar, but to make sure you punctuate, you did usage, you did everything correctly. This one happens to be the Little Brown Handbook, but there was the Warner Handbook and there was the McGraw-Hill Handbook. But guess what? They all did the same thing. They all had 4 sections. They had a grammar section, they had a usage section, they had a mechanics, writing mechanics section, and a punctuation section. What does that spell? GUMP. So they all had GUMP. Now, if you add the word English at the beginning and P for program at the end, you have an English program with GUMP in the middle. So eGUMP is an English, it's an electronic handbook, and it had 4 sections. So now, let me tell you this. When I put my handbook together, this was my handbook. This was my eGUMP handbook. Guess what? It had 4 sections. It had grammar, usage, mechanics, and punctuation. Now, this is 520 pages. And I'm saying that a student who takes eGUMP in 30, 35, 40 hours, self-study, all self-graded, all online, can learn all this. Now, how are you going to learn 520 pages? Well, I'm going to do a little magic right now. I'm going to take this and I'm going to change this to this. 4 pieces of paper. I've got a grammar, 1 page. I've got a usage. I have a writing mechanics and I have a punctuation. And that's all a student needs while they're doing it. Now, let me explain grammar. Hard to believe. This is all of grammar on 1 piece of paper. Everything you need to know, the 20 lessons, everything is here. And when the student's doing Module 1, they can refer to this. Now, let me take it a step further and show you how easy learning sentence structure is. Okay? A sentence is a string of words. Starts with a capital letter, ends with a punctuation mark. Now, if you took your finger and put it on any word in any sentence that you write, your odd, and you wanted to tell me what it was, your odds are 3 to 1 against you that you'll get it right. Okay, so if you put your finger on a word, but if you know this, a word is either going to name, it's going to express action, stated, being, or condition, it's going to modify or describe an adjective or a verb, adjective, or adverb, or it's going to join. So there's only 4 possibilities. So you put your finger on the word and it says, oh, that word names, or that word expresses. Now, if it names something, in only 3 questions, it answers a who, what, whom question. It'll be a noun or pronoun. It'll answer who, what, whom question. And there's 6 possible choices. I call that peso. It can be a predicate noun and a positive, an indirect object, a direct object, a subject, or object preposition. But if it's expressing, it'll express action, stated, being, or condition. It'll be transitive or intransitive, or it'll be a helping verb. And you know what's amazing? After all these years, because it was drilled into me, I can still say the helping verbs. Be, being, been, am, is, are, was, were. The three D's, do, did, does. The three H's, have, has, had, may, can, might, could, would, should. So the old way was the good way. Now, if it's describing or modifying, it's either going to add to a noun and be called an adjective, adjective. It's always going to answer the same questions: which one, how many, what kind, or whose. If it's adding to a verb, let's call it an adverb. It'll answer the question when, where, why, how, to what extent. So in life, not just sentence structure, there's only three sets of questions, no matter who you're talking to: who, what, whom, which one, how many, what kind, or whose, when, where, why, how, or to what extent. Now, if it's joining, it's what is it doing? If it's joining, it's connecting things. So it's either going to be a preposition or a conjunction. If it's a conjunction, coordinating conjunction, it's going to be the fanboys. It's going to be for, and, nor, but, or, yet, or so. So by the time a student finishes coding sentences, diagramming, they know all this. But sometimes you're not just looking at a word, you're looking at a group of words. So if you're looking at a group of words, it's either a phrase or it's a clause. Now, if it's a phrase, it can be a prepositional phrase: anywhere a mouse can run or a cloud can float. It can be in a positive phrase. What word's inside a positive? Positive. When you want to be positive, use an appositive. For example, I know two Will Smiths: Will Smith, the famous actor, and Will Smith, my neighbor. So if I said to you, Will Smith called, would you know which one I'm talking about? But if I wanted to be positive, I'd use an appositive: Will Smith, my neighbor, called. Now you know who I'm talking to. And then there are the three verbals. Well, what's a verbal? What word's inside verbal? Verb. And what does a verbal do? It's anytime you use a verb as anything but a verb. A verbal is the pig. It's a participle that uses a verb as an adjective. It's an infinitive that starts with a preposition in, to, and it can be used as a noun, adjective, or adverb. Or it's a gerund, which ends with ing, and it's always used as a noun. So now you've learned how to identify the phrases. And then the dependent clauses, there's three. There's noun, adjective, adverb. And guess what? They all answer the same questions: who, what, whom, which one, how many, what kind, or whose, when, why, how, extent. And then there's four types of sentences. Those are simple, compound, complex, and compound, complex. Now, by the time somebody finishes this one sheet of paper, two sides, they have mastered EGUMPP. They can look at any sentence, identify at whether they read it or write it, identify every word, phrase, or clause in the sentence. Now, how do you prove at the end of 20 lessons that a student can do this? Well, you give them a simple assessment: 4 questions to answer, or 4 sentences to write. That all can be done in about 5-10 minutes. Now, I'll compare this to when I had my career school. My career schools we were not bringing in the top 50% of classes. We were bringing in the lower 50%. Great students, but a lot of them just didn't do that well in high school. And then one of our programs was accounting, computerized accounting, bookkeeping. So our entrance test was not for them to get into school because they were accepted. It was to find out, do you belong taking an accounting course or bookkeeping? And the easy way is this: you give them 18 questions: add, subtract, multiply, divide, whole numbers, fractions, decimals, percents. Okay, so you give them a problem like 85 minus 22 plus 42. So in seconds, 5 minutes of assessment, you know. Well, it's the same thing true with this. If there's only 5 phrases, if there's only 3 dependent clauses, and if there's only 4 types of sentences, that's 12. So if I gave 4 sentences, and this is what I did with my grammar bowl to qualify for the grammar bowl. Give me an example of a simple sentence with an appositive phrase and a prepositional phrase. Okay? Give me an example of a complex sentence with an adverb clause and a infinitive phrase. So I could use all 12 in 4 sentences, and within 5-10 minutes, I knew exactly if somebody understood everything was on the sheet. So I've always had a problem with the NCTE. Why wouldn't you want all of your students to be able to develop this skill? And wouldn't this skill really help? Now, without going into a lot of detail, let's take this one, punctuation. It doesn't matter what order you complete these three modules because with punctuation, for example, there's 6 checkpoints in a sentence where you check the punctuation. Well, the first one, end of the sentence. We all know that. The second one is introductory element, a word, phrase, or clause that comes before the subject. The next one is a word, phrase, or clause that interrupts the subject and verb or verb and complement. The next one is the end of the sentence. The next one is avoid run-on sentences, is 2 independent clauses. And the last one is a series. Now, once you understand everything here, that means you can interpret and apply the rules accordingly. So when you look at the rules on this particular summary sheet, and it says anytime you have a compound sentence with the 2 independent clauses joined by a coordinate conjunction, use a comma. Well, now, if you don't know what a compound sentence is, if you don't know what an independent clause is, and if you don't know what a coordinate conjunction is, that rule doesn't mean anything to you. That's why we have the problems that we have today. Students can't interpret and apply the rules of usage, mechanics, and punctuation because they don't know it. So that's what EGUMPP is. EGUMPP is a simplified way, self-grading, and the beauty is for the instructor doesn't even have to be perfect in grammar themselves or be proficient because they don't. Here's what they do: there's a help library in the instructor portal, and that help library is loaded with videos, instructions, and regular instructions, like written instruction. First of all, it shows the student how to get started. Second of all, it shows you how to accept students in a class, how to get a class started. Third of all, it has 6 reports for monitoring student progress. And then it also has a message. So you tell your students that you must score 91 to 100 in every lesson because every lesson has 4 exercises. It has a tutorial, it has what we call lesson reinforcement, it has a practice to mastery, which means like the timetables, you can take the over and over again until you master the word function, and it has the lesson review to make sure you understand everything from the previous lessons. Now, you tell your students that, hey, you have to do this. You have to be able to score 91 to 100%. Don't worry if it takes you 10 times, as long as you do it. That's like if you were learning multiplication tables. You wouldn't go to the 4 table until you mastered the 3 and the 2. So it's the same concept. Okay, so it's a piece of cake. And what we proved with our students in all our Arizona Grammar Bowls, they all learned this on their own. It was a piece of cake. So that's pretty much what EGUMPP is, an easy way to become totally proficient that somebody will spend the rest of their life, just like if they learned the multiplication tables, okay, they'll spend the rest of their life not having a problem adding, subtracting, multiplying, dividing. If they learn sentence structure, they can look at any sentence, they can make them easier to read, and they can comprehend difficult sentences.
So, as we close out for the day, what is one key takeaway that you hope our educators walk away with from today's conversation?
I'm going to give you 2 instead of 1, so you're going to have to hear both of them. Okay. The first one is this: teachers need to practice what the State Department of Education preaches. Now, what do I mean by that? What I mean by that is no matter what state that an instructor lives in, they need to go to their State Department of Education, look up their language art learning objectives, look up the grammar objectives, as I did, and I've got like, I don't know, 8 or 10 of them right here. I won't mention all the states, but it doesn't matter what state you go to. And they all basically say the same thing. Like this one particular says, by the end of 8th grade, They should use nouns effectively, use pronouns effectively, use verbs effectively, produce compound complex sentence using a dependent clause, subordinate conjunction, conjunction adverb, corrective conjunctions, coordinating conjunction. So I can go on with any of these states, and they all say the same thing. But practice what you're preaching. If you're saying you should do this, then do it. My recommendation is that students should, just like I say with arithmetic, they should take an assessment test to make sure they can add, subtract, multiply, divide. They're not all going to be in algebra and higher math. Their minds aren't set, but they all are going to have to budget, do a budget or go into a department store and it says 20% off and be able to calculate those things in their head. They should all be able to go and write sentences, analyze those sentences, and make them better. So, what I'm saying is one, practice what they preach. And two, grammar, don't leave school without it. Get hooked on grammar with EGUMPP.
So, for our final question, for those who want to learn more about your work or explore the EGUMPP platform, where is the best place to connect with you?
Very, very simple. Go to egumpp.com. All you do is EGUMPP, not Forrest Gump. Go to egumpp.com, right? And request a demo. We will automatically send you a demo. You can play with the demo. And if you have any questions, schedule a Zoom call with us and we'll answer all of your questions.
And just for our listeners, I will be adding that in the show notes for you guys. Bob, thank you so much for being here with us today.
Well, thank you for having me. I enjoyed it very much.
So for our listeners, we are proud to be supported by the Solvia Learning Group, whose commitment to advancing education makes conversations like these possible. So if today's episode sparked ideas or helped reframe your thinking, please be sure to subscribe, leave us a review, and share it with a colleague. And before we go, if you're a school or district leader looking to strengthen your crisis readiness, please check out my new professional development course for administrators, A Peer-Led Journey to Building a Continuity of Operations Plan. This is now available through Circles at getcircles.org. It's practical, collaborative, and designed to help you plan for disruption while sustaining student success. So until next time, keep innovating, keep inspiring, and keep making a difference.